Do you want to start, or can I ask a question?
Please go ahead, Tanya.
Okay, thank you. I had a question for Stina, actually, because you ended up with this sort of beautiful idea of engagement, which is created by the influencers creating original content, which is then sort of matched with the brand's idea of new kind of marketing, I guess. Can you say anything about the kind of discussions or conflicts in the background that this sometimes might bring about in the influencers in their creative work? Because of course, while many of them think that the commercial collaboration gives them a chance to do what they love doing, what they want to do, of course they also have to sacrifice some aspects of it, right? I would imagine that you have to kind of negotiate what is the fine line between sort of roaming around freely and then, looking free but still being controlled by the agency.
I'll use this. I need it for the video, and my voice is a little bit low as well. Yeah, that's a really, really good question, because we do have those discussions all the time. It's really important when we sign new influencer or talent to the network that we have the discussion. If somebody wants to commercialize their content, they must be willing to make certain sacrifices. And the first discussion that we have are what kind of sacrifices can we make without risking the careful bond between the influencer and the viewer. So for us, it's really, we're always on the side of the influencer. If we see it's working, the content, then we will always prioritize the influencer's content over any kind of commercial message. And if, I hope that's not me. So, and if the brand won't accept it, then we do say no. So it's not like you can, it's not the same thing as pay to play, because there's certain, the brand needs to make compromises and the YouTuber needs to make compromises, and usually that is the best fit. And yes, we have a lot of discussions around it. It's like, where do the boundaries go? And what type of brands are we going to be approaching, and what are we going to say no to directly?
Can I answer this question? So I'm going to share. So, in response to the brand, some influencers are also at the crossroads of this, and the people I've worked with who understand they need to push out more content to monetize this, make the brands happy, but at the same time feel a sense of loss to the community they've built up. They do this strategy of splinting. So if you follow this influencer close enough, you know they have a primary channel, and if you stan or you fan them enough, you know they have to put out commercial messages. What influencers do in return is start off splinter channels. They will say, this is my second Instagram account, this is my 4th YouTube account, this is my 700 Twitter account, where it's just me, no advertorials. And if you don't mind that it's not going to be pristine, then I'm going to be myself. I can promise you this platform has no commercial messages. So to preserve themselves, they keep the thing that makes them money, and then they start a second account that makes them happy, so to speak. Yeah.
So you talked about trust, that there's a lack of trust from millennials and advertising, and you talked about relatability, how people relate to influencers and how they kind of know everything about their lives. So I know that in Finland regulation is a big issue, and we like to regulate things. This kind of industry is self-regulated at the moment, right? Am I right?
We're getting there. I mean, when we started 4 years ago, there was nothing really to go by. We had to go through like how the blogs were regulated, and even that was really ambiguous. So what we the good thing is that the YouTubers that work with, they're very responsible. They have nothing to hide. When they work with brands, I think when you do a collaboration with a brand, you have to be really proud about it, because you're going to bring it into your content, and the content is your baby. So it's kind of like the clothes you're gonna put your baby in. You don't want them to look ugly and kind of funny. You want them to look good so that you can present them to everybody. So it's the same thing when it comes to like branded content or working with brands. It's really important to be really open about it. And I think from the other networks in Finland, Splay, we've always been really also because I have such a long background in marketing, I think it's really important to be as open as possible. And if a YouTuber or influencer doesn't want to be open about it, and their attitude is like, well, I don't want to tell my fans, I get money for this. I can pretend that I just bumped into this stuff. I was like, well, I don't want to work with them. And then that's not fair, because you're mistreating your own audience. So we're really open about it. We put signs everywhere. Like everything is, this contains branded content. This is branded. This is branded. And the good thing is when you do that, first of all you need to challenge yourself. That's really annoying. So you need to challenge yourself to create the content that people will still want to watch it. People they're not gonna be so inclined to watch it if it has branded stuff in it.
Can I extend that question? All right, so to you two, thinking about content and the culture, there's been a couple of kind of scandals lately where the content is just pushing the boundaries too far. Do you think the overall culture and the content of the content of the YouTubers and streamers should be regulated in some way? And is that even possible in this kind of environment that's global and really not in that way kind of containable?
Right, so this relates really well to your first question on regulation. My work started out in Southeast Asia and then in East Asia and Australia, and just about 9 months ago I started looking at Scandinavia. So I've started in Sweden. I would very much like to go into Finland, so I'm going to speak for the economies that I know better. If you're asking me regulation as in law and governance, I would say it's extremely regulated in East Asia. Things like disclosing a sponsored ad, that's been ongoing for the last 8 years. Things like signing contracts, ensuring that you pay providence to the platform, everyone in the process, your videographers, your comment moderators gets a cut of your profit. Moderation in the money sense, that's always been going on. Moderation outside of law in the cultural social sense, that's also been talked about. Down to the detail, for example, an influencer sitting down with a manager going, I have a new relationship. Should I talk about it? I want to talk about it. How should I do it? Do I start with hinting on a particular platform? Do I let rumors fly on forums so people get comfortable with the idea? Social cultural regulation, depending on your relationship with your managers, is very embedded in some parts in East Asia. Content regulation, when it goes out of bounds, I'm going to reverse the question and say sometimes it's regulated to push the boundaries. For example, in the clips that I didn't get to show, it's very common in East Asia to be provocative. You can have influencers leaking or being leaked in a sex tape. So it looks as if they're all chummy with a romantic partner. You can't really see anything. You hear a lot of sensual sounds, and then the video cuts off. And then influencers go into what is called dark time. They go silent, and they don't say anything. They don't tweet. They don't put messages for 3 days. And we all know on the internet 3 days is like 10 years, right? So everyone's like, oh my gosh, this person must be guilty. And then on day 4, they emerge with an extended video going, you know this viral video you saw? Do you see that little symbol in that corner in this video marked in like 1 minute 26 seconds? Yes, this is actually a viral ad to sell Durex condoms. So pushing the boundaries other than an accident is now part of the strategy to get people's attention. But I do get what you mean. When there are controversies that happen, as a sociologist and anthropologist, my reaction is that these are productive. These tell us whether or not an audience is ready to go further. Which is why today plastic surgery videos are just so common. When they first started coming up in 2007, you were like, this is horrifying, there's blood and gore. But today you're like, okay, there's another plastic surgery video. And these change over time. So I do think they are important. And whether or not they should be regulated, I think depends on your stance on freedom of speech. Anything to add?
Well, actually I had a question. Like, I'm more like a leading the panel.
Yes.
So I'm just like a vehicle for your thoughts and kind of think of me as yeah. But actually building on that, I don't know how widespread this is, but I've been following some of these YouTubers who play video games or mobile games, and they would like to kind of transition to a different game because they don't like the actual game that they have been playing anymore. But their fan base is like really dependent on them playing that actual game. So the question is like, to what extent are they actually kind of living in this golden cage? Like, how can you transition? Or if you are fed up of eating 11,000 calories per day, what else can you do? How does it work?
The influencers I work with have several strategies. So on YouTube, you can, for example, set up playlists. If there is this primary core content that you know your viewers want, keep doing that, it makes you the money. But you can also embed videos where you do other diversified content. Playlists almost makes it as if you have sub-channels within your one channel. For the more bold influencers who want to monetize content, they start multiple platforms. Wong Fu Productions, a really big Asian American company, they're 10 years old this year. They also started Wong Fu 2. They also started several other channels to do and pursue new content, not wanting to dilute the brand of the original. But I also do know of influencers who completely abandon the thing that makes them money. Either you fall into depression, or you go through an awakening, or as a young person, you just go through your life stage and your interests and hobbies change. Most of the time there is a transition, and this transition comes through a personal confession. They break from gameplay, they do a narrative video, they talk about how my life as a YouTuber is so hard, you think this is glamorous? Here are all my problems. If you love and support me, this is my new life. Please come and join me here. And this does persuade some loyal followers to come on with you, but it also really clearly signposts that there is a clash between their internal values and the thing they know that makes them money, and they pull viewers through these landmark personal confessions.
Yeah, that's it's very similar. I mean, we do transition people's YouTube channels depending on their life changes. They want to change their they develop. I mean, they want to change their own content. And when it comes to YouTubers, it's really important to have a discussion about personal branding. It can change because it's their channel is them channeling their own interests and experiences through the channel. So it can be, if you don't know, if you don't have experience with communications or creating a strategy on how to transition, of course it would be a little bit scary, and there are certain things you should be aware of that you don't want to do. But when you do it and you're authentic and you're honest with your followers, they will understand. And if they want to see gameplay, then they can watch the old videos, and if they don't like your new content, then they won't. But we've transitioned some amazingly successful channels. They're much bigger now as a video blogger than they used to be as a gamer. Much better. I mean, their fan base changed a little bit, but it grew astronomically.
Actually, just a quick follow up on that. Have you actually experienced like when an influencer kind of retires? Can you speak of like retiring from this field? And like what happens? Like what's the afterlife?
Well, this field is awfully young. Well, you do see people getting burned out, of course, and because it's a lot of work. I mean, to be honest, the amount of views these people get, and it's them. It's they film, they write, they produce, they edit, they gotta go to work, they gotta go to school, they have families, they have everything, and this is not an easy job to do. It seems easy, but it really isn't. So I think in general, I mean, in the global YouTubing world, you do see people getting tired of it, and especially with the YouTube algorithm, is when it gives preference of quantity over quality. So it is really, really daunting when you have to do all the work. So we have seen this. I don't think I've really seen anybody retire. There's a couple of channels I think they got really good job offers from traditional media. Say they went to do TV or something like that, and they left YouTube completely. But from our YouTubers, I don't think none of them from when we started, none of them actually retired. Then they just become inactive for a little while, and then they come back. We've seen some really, really great, stories of YouTubers, almost, leaving their channel and then coming back and it becoming really good again. So I think it's kind of like this. We're all kind of moody, I guess. So it depends on their mood and whether or not they feel like doing content. So yeah.
There are 4 major transitions, I think. The first is when they just stop updating, so they go dark, and then they go darker, and then they just never come back to the light and they fade away, and then they just slowly die off. But then there are also these influencers who again make these milestone announcements like, oh, 10 days from now I'm giving you this video, 9 days, 8 days, and then on the day itself they're like, I'm quitting YouTube, or I'm quitting Instagram. If we think about this, there are very many case studies where just quitting becomes a gateway to a new career. Just 2 years ago, Australian Instagrammer Stina, she came out with a crying video on YouTube going, "I'm so stressed out, this industry is bad for my mental health." She made enemies by calling out a lot of other influencers she was working with, and she's like, "I quit." By the way, this is my new website, gamechangers.com, where she's now doing lifestyle products or organic products and going on a health path. So yes, she has quit that brand of herself, but this big announcement also introduced the next step of her brand. The third way that influencers transit, and I was going to show you pictures of cute babies, but I didn't have time, is when they progress in their life stage and most of the time become mothers. Mostly the women do this. When they become pregnant, they literally grow and groom a second generation of influencers. Their content then shifts into their child being a micro celebrity or a child influencer. And you're not really a mummy blogger in that you're no longer talking about your experiences, but your child, it's the celebrity that you're a manager of. And this is also one very popular transition. The last transition, like Stina has mentioned, is a lot of these influencers move into the back end. Not necessarily into the traditional mainstream media industry. Sometimes they start their own influencer agencies. They may groom people who collaborated with them. They may pick super fans who are really, really enthusiastic and then groom these super fans into influencers themselves. Sometimes, before they spark off and then fade away, they use their celebrity on social media to promote an alternative business, whether it's starting a makeup line, very common, a fashion line, but even less orthodox things like starting an F&B business. The most odd transitions I've seen are influencers moving into being housing agents, into being insurance agents, or to being full-time teachers in primary school. So some shifts are more natural in that you can still use your celebrity on social media, some not so much, but that is also a slow transition for retirement, so to speak.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions in the audience, or should I just shoot away?
So I have a question for both of you. How do you ensure that the influencer will be suitable for the brand? Wouldn't have any risk in the future for a brand. For example, I couldn't imagine having Kim Kardashian doing branding for Paulik, the coffee. So how can you ensure that for the future? And by the way, Christina, maybe you can move a little bit to the left, so because you're sitting next to the sound, so it has that sound.
That was me being annoying. Yeah, we work a lot with that. So first of all, we talk a lot with the brands and what type of values they represent. So we start with kind of matching of values between the YouTuber and the brand. If they fit, if it's a good match, if they they share the same type of values or what their product represents, then it's pretty simple to go forward. But of course, we have the discussions on both ends. We do a lot of time. We talk a lot. We have a lot of people discussing back and forth. Our WhatsApp goes crazy. We don't use email much at the office anymore. It's just WhatsApp all the time, going back and forth, trying to evaluate, would this work and how it would work. But we do a lot of we do spend a lot of time with the planning phase because that usually yields the best result. And then when it comes to working with the brand, we do this as a sustainable basis because the influencer is so close to the viewer. They engage with them every day. So we always evaluate how are viewers going to take this on? Are they going to see it as a positive thing or a neutral thing, or might they actually get upset with it and will there be a backlash, a negative backlash for you working with this brand? So when we've done the assessment, it usually works out really, really well, and then we go into the content. What type of video should we be creating, and what kind of ideas the influencers has around it.
I'm going to answer your question in two parts. The first is we tend to underplay the role of the managers, of course. So in one of the influencer firms that I embedded with, the manager knows you so well that they could tell me how old each puppy or kitten of an influencer is. So when someone comes to them with a product, they immediately know, all right, this influencer has a puppy, this influencer likes cats, this influencer uses this brand of phone. What products are compatible with their daily lives so they don't actually have to perform or pretend that they have to take on a new product. This was really, really important for them because, and in this specific example, Singapore is a tiny country, and influencers are exposed all the time for incongruence. For example, a string of influencers are promoting Samsung in all their advertorials, but they were caught out in public transport or in the club using iPhones, and their viewers and their followers were taking sneaky photos and exposing them on the internet. Or they may be promoting one service provider, but then on a train, someone looks into their phone and the icon and sees it's a different service provider. So because of this very strange, tight space in this ecology, the managers and the influencers choose brands not based on what is most profitable for them, but what is most convenient, so that they don't have to put in so much effort into staging and acting. But I should also say that this is a privilege allocated to really the top influencers, who even have the ability to turn down offers, whereas many of them who are first starting out, they can be brand evangelists, but zero brand evangelists. Like in 3 months, this is the best thing ever. 6 months later, this is the best thing ever. But that lag time that you are contracted between brands erases the memory of followers that you used to be a brand evangelist of something else. Time on the internet is very weird. Like I said, 3 days feels like 10 years. It also means that a scandal may feel really explosive in this moment, but people are going to forget it in a week because there are 10 other competing scandals. So there's this idea of like a social amnesia. We know somewhere it exists, the computer remembers, but in the front of our mind, content moves so fast and there's so much of it that we forget. And a lot of influencers rely on this when the brand congruence goes wrong.
Hey, thank you for the talk. So my question is about tech, in the tech side, and I recently came across this platform called DTube. I don't know if that's familiar to you guys, but so DTube, they have this digital cryptocurrency there, of course, and depending on the contents, if they get upvoted or the metrics could be like higher views, they get paid out. So like it could be like $50 to $500 or something like that. And I thought it could be a nice way to just sort of financially incentivize the users to create like meaningful and good contents. And you said like before, they're not getting paid until they really reach a certain point, right? And primarily right now we use YouTube as the dominant platform, but I was wondering if that kind of a shift is happening in the platform side as well, if that makes sense to you guys. So yeah, that's basically my question. I could extend more, but first I would love to hear your response to this.
I don't know the platform that you were talking about, but of course we're looking into kind of evaluating the space. We work primarily with YouTube. It's a really important platform. It's also the reason why the influencers create content on YouTube is because they do pay out a certain amount of the ad revenues to the content creators. We don't have that on the other social media platforms. So, so there is a small, in the beginning it's a very small financial incentive to create content on YouTube. So I definitely see it interesting and new models or different platforms emerging, because if me as a person who watches a lot of YouTubers, somebody does a really great job. Some of the YouTubers, they just the skill of editing and shooting the videos and storytelling is so high. I think these guys definitely should and some of them are just doing it because they love it. So I I would like to sponsor them from my
it's actually related to that, because people like start creating content because they really love it, right? So there's always an organic story behind it. And I thought if they get to be paid micro payments or through digital cryptocurrencies, then I think it would also incentivize them to create even more better content in that kind of organic background, like their passions and everything like that. So I was
and I think it relates back to what Chris mentioned is when you're a big YouTuber, of course, then you have a lot of options out there. You can be selective on who you work with. But when you're an up and coming YouTuber, cameras aren't cheap, and there's a lot of and computers aren't cheap, and all the software, it's not cheap, and you have to fund it somehow. So it would be interesting to see different types of sponsorship options coming up, where you're able to at least cover the cost of creating the content, so that you can maybe break and make it one day. In Finland, it is also kind of regional, because in Finland you don't really see this kind of where people give money or these kind of gifts or tokens or whatever, which I understand are really really popular in Asia. You don't see that in Finland. They don't they don't give you €2 to say this or €1 to do that. We don't see that yet. So we're going to see that. Maybe it's going to come up one day.
I'm also going to answer your question in 2 parts. And I'm sorry I keep saying like 2 parts and 3 parts, but if I don't say it, I'll forget there is more that I wanted to say. So, first, on that question, it already exists, micropayments on several other platforms. And like Stina reminded us, in many parts of Asia, tokens, cashing out 50 cents on chat roulette, cashing out $1 a click, these things already exist. We do not think of them as influencers because we don't equate influencers with monetary earnings. We always see them as the face of the brand. But like I've said earlier, visibility doesn't always equal money. Just because you're the most watched doesn't always mean you're the most paid. And oftentimes, even if you're the most paid, you may not want to be the most watched because if you keep on the down low, these small streams of revenue keep coming in. The second thing I wanted to say is I feel at the crux of your question is if we automate things, cryptocurrency, measuring up, upvoting, and then cashing out, if we automate things and rely on machines and algorithms, we assume it will be safer, more accurate, and more fair. Yes, in a sense. But no in a sense in that we are also gaming this. We can buy views, we can moderate the algorithms, we can buy likes. So in response to this, a lot of influencers are now coming between algorithms and organic reach with strategies. On Instagram, they're called Instagram pods. On Twitter, they're called Twitter decks, where a ring, like a subculture of influencers, mutually promote each other's content so that whatever they put out is also seen by the followers of, say, 4 or 5 others in the network. Organic? Yeah, sort of, because they're real humans viewing your content. Are they gaming the algorithm? Yes, also, because if I'm pushing your content and we all mutually push you at the same time, your visibility gets amplified. But it's all pre-planning down to the day and the time in which you post something or you like something. So I don't think complete automation is the answer. I also don't think complete organic content is ever possible today. But the gray area of Instagram pods and Twitter decks tells us that you can take knowledge from both sides and gamify it among your subcultures in your communities. I hope I've answered your question.
Can you explain one more time the intersection between the two?
Sure. So we assume that when we have algorithms to moderate and regulate things like viewership and hits and cashing out payments, that it then must be fair. But technology is not neutral. In everything that we do, we can also game and subvert the system and play the system so that it unfairly accords visibility or credit or status to different things. For example, buying viewership. For example, click farms that we can purchase off servers in India or in China or in Russia. What we have been calling authentic so far is viewership that's not paid. I don't necessarily agree with this, but when we talk about organic viewership, we think it arises naturally. Like, I'm naturally popular. People love my content. I don't have to pay for it. What influencers realize is that this organic realm no longer really exists. It could be that this was the case 5 or 7 years ago, but today there are so many influencers and so much content that quality doesn't guarantee visibility. Quality doesn't guarantee that people want to see your content. At the same time, while there are algorithms, people are also cheating the system and gaming it. And by law and regulation, a lot of these gaming the system is becoming illegal. Influencer agencies will drop you if they know you buy followers or if you buy hits. So what influencers, the strategic ones, are doing is combining both. On different platforms, they form small rings of mutual influencers where they help to promote each other's content. On Instagram, if you want to read about it, you can Google Instagram pods. And on Twitter, they're called Twitter decks. Basically what happens is a group of influencers push out content, and then they mutually promote the content of these other influencers intentionally. It may feel organic in that, oh, this influencer's stuff is so good, I'm going to promote them, and then this other influencer promotes someone else, and it goes off in a chain. It's unlike YouTube collaborations where I shout you out, you shout me out, it's easy to see. In a pod or a deck, the circuit is so haywired, it's really difficult to track them unless you're locked into the subculture and you know who's promoting whom. But within these Instagram pods and these Twitter decks, what you're essentially doing is using your content in exchange for someone else following. If I push your content, you push my content, the following that I have also gets to witness your content. So I'm manually gaming the algorithm, but I'm also relying on what by definition is organic in that I didn't pay for this, but it's all manipulated behind the scenes. I'm sorry if this is not very eloquent, but I wish I had like skills to show you this thing in 3D, like a ring of people and then their followers and then gaming content this way. But maybe when I have more clarity, we can have a deeper chat later.
Sure, thank you.
Something slightly different. So we have been talking a lot about clients almost equating with brands like commercial domain, but and also like the question is like in two parts, if you don't mind me borrowing the style. So first part is have you actually come across with like collaborations like with non-commercial brands like NGOs or governments or governmental agencies or whatnot? And the second part, how would you like to see, like, how would you envision that to be? Let's say university collaborates with an influencer. How would that look like?
This has literally happened in Australia. The University of Sydney brought back 2 of their former students. One of them is my favorite Instagrammer, is Margaret Zhang. She's Chinese born, moved to Sydney, now in New York. Started out as a 15-year-old fashion blogger, exploded on Instagram, has now shifted from being merely the face of a brand or an Instagrammer to becoming like creative director or camera person behind campaigns for Gucci, Chanel and all these high street brands. So they brought back these 2 influencers to campus to convince students that their university experience allowed them this alternative career. It sounds unusual, it sounds incompatible, but the idea is basically the same. What influencers are selling today is no longer just themselves or their brand. It used to be this way, but now that we're so saturated, they're selling their ability to amplify content. It doesn't matter what this content is, if it passes through me, I can bring your status and your visibility from this to this. So no matter the product, if it's an NGO, paid or unpaid, a university education or a very specific commercial product, influencers do the same thing, which is to visibilize and amplify content in an already saturated space. But on the flip side, there are a lot of influencers who today wanting to prove that they're not all commercial and that they have some humanity left in them, volunteer to do these for not-for-profit endeavors. For example, it has to be congruent with their brand still. For example, if they have a pet, they may push out free unpaid Instagram posts to promote a pet welfare society. If they have an ailing grandparent, they may want to push out the services of this hospital who were kind to their grandparent for a service they paid for. Some of this is because they genuinely want to give shout-outs to these products, but also at the back of their minds for some influencers is to show that I'm not all about the money. I can do humanity too and do non-commercial things for my benefit.
Yeah, that was I don't have really very much to add to that. I think it's just really, really important to be, as an influencer, to kind of show different aspects of yourself, and it goes back to the kind of value-based communications. What are my values? What's important to me? And then you find the charities, or you work with either the brands. Then it's usually paid for. And when we work with and if they want to work with NGOs or charities, then usually it's just because they want to promote that, they know it's a good cause, and it's something that's important for them personally.
Actually, I have a question to Markus. How are we doing with time? We are doing fine. We have some sparkling and some snack over there. So when we are ready, we can go behind the curtains. that sounded somehow really dodgy. Let's go behind the curtains. But actually, I had one question. But so I have one question, and then one more from the audience, and then we can kind of continue with without the mics. So, what if someone wants to become a influencer or someone managing these influencers? What kind of skills do they need? Like, what can you do actually today already, like, to develop those skills, or what do you need?
Maybe I can start with talking about the managers, because we do employ, I have 4 talent managers in my team. Not easy to find them because there's no training for social media managers. so what we do look for is of course also a passion to consume content, certain creativity to understand what type of stories people tell. To become a good talent manager or to work with influencers, it's really important to understand what they're talking, what their style is on the videos. Then it's, of course, it's human relationship skills, communication skills. You have to understand what they want and you know what their dog's name is, and be genuinely interested in their lifestyle, because that will really help them go forward. And also kind of be able to, there's the latest talent manager we've been working with is actually has a background in personal training and personal, these kind of like more time management and stress management issues, so that they can identify as like, how can we help them become better people, and be more motivated in creating videos, because it's not always so motivating. So backgrounds are very, very wide. You have to be a really good project manager. You have a big task list, and you got to take care of them. There's a lot of if you're working with big influencers, a lot of requests coming from all different types. I mean, the amount of questions we get every day is like, I've never heard of things like this before, and we have to figure them out and understand what we're doing. Sometimes it's just business as usual, but we do get a lot of very different types of requests. So, and it's evaluating what is the best for the influencer and what you want to work with.
There are actually courses you can take to be an influencer, according to the news, if it's still fact. And I don't want this to sound exotic. When I say in China or in Asia, it's really because the economy is so big and so saturated that it forces innovation out of people. Now in China, you can literally do a degree that translates into English as a degree in influencer studies. Like, you take this degree, and then in 3 years, you're qualified to be an influencer. And it teaches you all sorts of skills, from like decorum, how do you sit, because people are going to photograph you all the time, makeup, beauty, personal communication, camera skills, video skills, writing skills, eloquence, all of that. It sounds new and it sounds exciting, but if you think about it, we have always needed these skills for all sorts of jobs. I know in many technical colleges who teach video production, in order to lure young people into their courses, they just rename like Camera Production 101 or Studio Learning 101 to like, so you want to be an influencer, come and take this course. So because we pre-package or we change the way we sell these courses, it feels like, oh no, we need new skills to do these things. But really no, we have always had these skills in all sorts of occupations. We now mix and match them, and you remember that you put them together to be hyper visible on the internet. But from my experience in field work with influencers, seeing many of them who have left or who have failed or have gone through really, really dark times behind the scenes, I think there are 3 things that anyone who is an influencer aspirant needs to have or groom. First, you have to be really resilient. Even if you want to pursue a luxury self, so not one of those mukbang eaters or someone who dances with food or plays with shame, no matter how you want to brand yourself as pristine, clean and perfect, people on the internet will always find dirt on you. And at this point, you have to decide how you want to change this narrative. There are influencers who break down and cry and then give you sob videos. There are influencers who quit. But there are influencers who are also emerge stronger from this, are able to regain confidence. A very good example I love is one of the 18-year-old influencers I worked with who was exposed for photoshopping to make her waist smaller. It went viral. It even hit the newspaper headlines of a very small country. But in her next few posts, she intentionally uploaded very badly photoshopped photos, and she went, I'm flawless, I'm confident. It was really, really unlike her usual posts where she's very pristine and clean. But this showcased her ability to make fun of herself. It also showcased that while she's acknowledging the hate, she's not fueling it. So I think these kind of strategies to evidence your resilience in this industry is very important. Secondly, I think you need to be able to keep up with appearances physically. I cannot wear heels. I wore heels for the first time when doing field work in 2013 with influencers. I also bought my first makeup and first eyeshadow, and you know that scary thing that makes your eyelashes curl? I did all of that for the first time working with influencers. It's so much work and it's so much effort. We may think it's easy, and a lot of women certainly do this as part of our lives, but as a person who is constantly on camera or on social media and being photographed on the streets, these women are professionals. They're dedicated to it. On a day where they wake up and feel like crap and don't want to put up makeup just to go downstairs and buy food, they sometimes still have to do it to keep up their brand image, and it's so tiring. Just because it's a feminine activity and it's beautification doesn't mean it's not labor. It's still a skill, it's still a lesson you have to learn, and it's still effort. And I think we sometimes forget that when we trivialize things that women do on the internet. The third thing I think with influencers wanting to pursue a career in this industry is to always have a fallback. Many of the influencers I know were very prominent in their careers, but they were still maintaining their studies, they were planning a fashion line, planning an F&B business, knowing, like with all careers, if Facebook wants to close down tomorrow, they may lose their business. If Instagram changes their algorithm to be non-chronological, like they recently did, I may lose all my money. As much as we think these are people who are very much in control and very perfect and honed, a lot of their business is outsourced and a lot of their business is reliant on platforms. What if tomorrow wake up and there's no such thing as the internet? All these people would be jobless in a second, and this is not something they can control. So to be able to constantly put up with this anxiety that you could lose everything tomorrow for something you didn't do based on these external factors also requires you to always have a backup plan, I think. I feel like a therapist. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anything, one question from the audience.
Was there anyone else? Because I don't want to be the only one. Is there anyone else? No? Is this on? Yeah. So this is a wrap-up question. What do you see that's coming up next? What's the future for this? Trends and, you know, what's coming.
Well, it's actually this year when I was trying to make my own, you know, my list of 5 top influencer trends. It was actually the first year was actually a little bit more difficult. We didn't really see anything coming up. What is interesting, like what's bubbling underneath, is what's happening between Google, Facebook, and Amazon, for example. I mean, this is what we're seeing in Finland. Of course, in Asia, it's a little bit different because they have so many more platforms, and because last year was not a very easy year for YouTube and influencers. There was a lot of changes to the algorithm. A lot of big, prominent YouTubers lost ad revenues and pretty much lost their livelihood very quickly, which they spent years and years building. So it was a very difficult year for YouTube. So I think this year is going to be an interesting year to see. Are we back on track? What's going to happen with organic reach? Are we going to see new platforms popping up? Video platforms. So I mean, the industry is there. That's not going to change. What I was talking about, the trust and then the creating the relationship, that's going to stay there. It's more technological advancements. What are we going to see in the future? And at the moment, all I can say is that we're seeing the competition is growing, the quality is getting better, the quantity is getting higher. So definitely, what's challenging us is how do we find even more revenue streams? Because then you will, what is now happening with one camera and one guy is suddenly going to start maybe needing a production team, and that's going to cost a little bit more. Who's going to pay for it? Can we find new different types of ways of collaborating with brands or traditional media or anything else? So that's kind of like how I'm challenging that. It's going to grow the different types of revenue streams.
There's the commercial aspect, and then there's the performance or the aesthetic aspect. On the commercial aspect, I think we often equate being an influencer as being given a sum of money to hold a product and look pretty, or to embed it in a message. But we forget there's several ways to earn money. The paid partnerships with Instagram, these are a new affordance or a new quality that's been included in the app. But influencers have been putting out paid messages on Instagram since 2012. Now that it's become the norm to do so, and in between with the processes of doing hashtag sponsored, tagging a location, thanking a sponsor, now that Instagram has formalized this into their platform, they're also cutting into the revenue, and they are suddenly being regulators of what can be done. So I think the money aspect is now going to have a lot of middlemen, no longer just money from the client to the influencer. The platform wants a cut, the regulators want a cut. Everyone is going to try and siphon money. At the same time, you also forget there's several other ways to make money. I can also be a brand ambassador. I can be a creative director behind the scenes. I may lend you my platform to put out your messages, and I may not earn money from this, but I may earn money from the things you get and you benefit from me as second-hand passive income. So the ways that influencers are consolidating money and profits, I think, are very interesting and are changing, but are also no longer solely going to them. They're now being cut up by a lot of middlemen. Aesthetically, I think the biggest change, and one that I really, really enjoy, is that influencers are no longer pristine and picture perfect. They're playing with authenticity. So I don't believe that authenticity is a static concept. You can't be authentic and not. I believe it's a performance. Just because I cry on camera and show you vulnerability doesn't make it more real. Just because I say this is my bedroom in a confined space doesn't mean I'm not performing. Influencers have this really, really exciting way to make you believe or feel that they're bringing you into the back end, while also reserving some privacy and comfort for themselves. And their ability to lure you in is that exciting endeavor. So I call this in my various works like calibrated amateurism. I'm pretending like I'm an amateur, like, oh my god, I'm not wearing makeup today, don't mind me, but this is strategy, right? This is really fun because for viewers, you are now not just looking at an influencer, you're tracing their content, and it's like a game, like, hey, on this platform she wears this and she's this tall, on this platform she's this short, what's happening? And all the very excited fans who are locked in would cross-corroborate information from everywhere, different platforms, forums, to try and piece together just who this influencer really is. And it's so exciting, much, much more exciting than a perfect Instagrammer with perfect makeup and perfect fashion. So these chases that happen in the rumor networks and capillaries and forums, this is what makes people attracted to you above and beyond just subscribing to your feed. And I think it's really already happening within East Asia, moving towards Southeast Asia, and I'm pretty sure it'll be coming to the rest of the world soon.
Thank you. That was a wonderful wrap-up question and wrap-up answers as well. Thank you, Stina. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Markus. Thank you. Thank you, Experience Platform. Let's give a big hand for the crew here.